welcome to this planning committee meeting. I'd like to particularly welcome Councillor Jane Begley joining us for the first time. Thank you very much for doing that fairly arduous list of training before coming here. It's much appreciated that you did that. We're now open for apologies, please.
Yes, Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Wardle and also Councillor Nat Williams.
Noted. We have two sets of minutes to look at. First of all, I would like you to look at the meeting, the meeting of the 5th of December. Okay, there were, yes, many of you present at that meeting as well. So does anybody have any comments, critiques, or amendments or alterations to those minutes? I see none, and therefore both of those are passed into the record. That's the minutes of the 5th of December. We're now coming to the meeting of the 15th of January. Again, looking at those present, we are pretty much as we were then. So does anybody have any comments, questions, or matters arising from those minutes? Sorry? Right, okay, so and I'm now going to propose from the chair that those minutes are adopted as a true record of the meeting. Do I have a second, please? Second from Councillor Sturgeon. All those in favour? So, unanimous except for one abstention from all of you. Which way?
Abstention.
You're abstaining. Right, okay, thank you. That is however passed. Oh, right, okay, we're on to declarations of interest. We'll remind all councillors present on this committee that you must declare any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda. Can I ask now, does anybody have any such declaration to make? In that case, we shall move on to item 4. I do not feel that there are any matters that we will be discussing that will need to fall into part 2 and therefore exclude present public, and therefore intend that this meeting remains public. And so we do actually move on to agenda item 5. This is the planning application for land of Spruce Close and Celia Crescent, Spruce Close, Exeter. Can I ask the officers to make their presentation? Thank you.
So this is the site location with the blue line is beyond the development site itself, which is the red outline. This is a reserved matters application regarding layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. The outline consent for 93 new dwellings was originally refused by the planning committee but allowed at appeal. The outline consent includes various approved plans, parameter plans on scale, height, movement, open space provision, and 3 detailed access drawings. A new valley park of over 9 hectares has been agreed under a section 106 attached to the outline consent, and the developable area is nearly 4 hectares. So the northwest part of the site, as agreed at the outline stage, would have a lower density with more detached dwellings and a maximum building height of 10.5 metres. The southeast part of the site would have a slightly higher density and a slightly higher height limit at 12 metres. That's been approved at the outline stage. So the proposed dwellings would have pitched roofs, grey tiled and solar panels, elevations to include render, red brick and grey stone, all with a 2-storey appearance, a range of semis, terrace and detached, and garages. This is a street scene showing how it would look. Another street scene and some CGIs and another one. So there were 32 objections. I think there have now been 35 up to today, mostly concerning highways issues, the principle of the development, ecology, flooding, infrastructure, residential amenity, character, Valley Park, impact on the wider landscape setting, and construction. However, the scheme has got outline consent, and many of the concerns expressed in the representations have already been assessed and found acceptable, such as the principle of development on the greenfield site, infrastructure, highway safety, and the details of the 2 site access points. Other concerns also lie beyond the remit of the application because they are addressed under the outline conditions or the Section 106 agreement, such as the Valley Park, biodiversity net gains, developer contributions, and construction phase, parking, that sort of thing. There have been no objections from any statutory consultees except for the lead local flood authority. The drainage conditions are actually subject to an outline condition rather than the reserve matters. So the drainage details themselves are pending consideration under a separate application. So in terms of this application, drainage only relates to the general site layout. So therefore, in this case, we're recommending approval of the reserve matters once the local flood authority removes its holding objection. The officer is on leave until tomorrow, so that should be this week. There was one objection from Living Options Devon that was relating to a confusion. There was a misnumbering of the wheelchair accessible units, but this matter has been fully resolved. So the impact on the wider area, including the landscape settings, found acceptable at the outline stage, subject to a building heights parameter plan. There is one house type proposed in the northwest part of the site, which would be higher than the 9.5 metres limit on the parameter plan. However, that parameter plan does state plus or minus 1 metre, so therefore it would be compliant. And although it would have rooms in the roof, the external appearance would still be that of 2 stories. So overall, it is the officer's view that this would be compliant with the parameter plan. A similar situation in the southeast part of the site, where the Tamar house type would be higher than the 11 metres, but it would be less than 12 metres. So with that caveat of plus minus 1 metre, it would still be compliant, and therefore overall we feel that the reserve matters are acceptable in this regard. So that's a reminder of the guidance set out in the residential design supplementary planning document. Some objections were put forward regarding to loss of privacy. So the lowest or smallest back-to-back distance between the proposed dwellings and Celia Crescent would be 32 metres. So the SPD sets out a 22 metre distance, and this would therefore be acceptable in terms of loss of privacy. In terms of overbearing impact, the separation gap to number 48 Celia Crescent would be 20 metres, and using the calculations set out in the guidance, a 17.6 metre gap would be required, and therefore the scheme again would be acceptable. There wouldn't be any closer relationship with the dwellings on Celia Crescent, so overall the scheme would be acceptable in terms of privacy and overbearing impact along this boundary. Objections were also received regarding Spruce Close dwellings. The separation gap there would be 21 metres at least, and there would be no back-to-back relationship due to the respective orientation. The proposed dwellings would front onto that boundary. There would be quite considerable screening provided by the intervening landscape, and there would be no overbearing impact or loss of privacy resulting. In terms of future occupiers, all of the instances of back-to-back relationships would be acceptable. There would be some instances where the gap would be shorter than that set out in our guidance. However, given that this is a reserved matter scheme and outline approval exists for up to 93 dwellings on this site, while these 5 instances would be less than ideal, the blank wall in this case would not be elevated, and the slightly short separation gap would not be considered sufficient grounds for refusal in this case. With highway safety, the impact of the 93 new dwellings was found acceptable at the outline stage, and the 2 access points were also approved. These are snips of the approved plans. One objection has been received regarding the boundary to the front garden of 67 Penwood Meadow Drive. The developer is currently in discussion with the occupier to provide a suitable boundary treatment, and this is a verbal update to the published report and update sheet. Officers feel that we should add in the text in yellow to condition 7, such that a boundary treatment to the front garden of 67 would be addressed by a condition. So cycle and car parking and EV charging provision have all been addressed by the outline conditions. Most of the highways related objections were concerned with double yellow lines, increased traffic and parking, and these matters have already been assessed and can't therefore be reconsidered here. Other objections concerned a Devon bank to go alongside the new access road running through the public open space, and this is to be addressed, or it has been addressed already, by the section 106, which requires the developer contribution to implement this Devon bank. So overall, in terms of highways, the proposal is considered acceptable. Coming to the benefits of the application, the outline consent has already been granted. 93 new dwellings would be a very positive contribution towards the current local housing need, and 35% of those would be affordable housing, to include 32 units on site plus a financial contribution, which is as set out in the section 106 agreement. This application has been substantially amended in response to the design review and also in response to the Urban Design Officer's comments. So we feel the design has been much improved and would include a lot more street trees and less visible car parking, amongst other amendments. Overall, the scheme applies with the approved parameter plans. Benefits would also include employment through the construction phase, increased footfall to local amenities, developer contributions, the new Valley Park, public open space on site, including the equipped and non-equipped play areas and the orchards, And in terms of biodiversity net gains, it would result in well over 10%, and would retain the majority of existing mature hedgerows and trees. So therefore, in line with MPPF paragraph 11C, no adverse impacts are considered to outweigh the benefits of the scheme, and therefore we recommend the proposal is granted, subject to conditions, including that amendment to condition 7 and the removal of the flood holding objection.
Thank you. Now inviting questions from members to the officer relating to the presentation. I think Councillor Patrick, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Catherine, for that presentation. Just a very quick question on that Valley Park, if I may. Does that mean that would be a City Council-owned Valley Park, like our other Valley Parks? And basically, what I'm particularly concerned about is if it's a guaranteed long-term Valley Park, what the sort of legal situation would be.
So the Valley Park is addressed under the outline Section 106 agreement, so we can't really go into the details at this stage.
Okay.
But there are provisions within the Section 106.
Okay, so nothing's changed since then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vizard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine, for a very clear report. Can I just ask, there's been mention in one or two of the objections about the lack of an ecological impact assessment since 2019. Has that been considered? Would there normally be an expectation 4 or 5 years down the line of a fresh report?
All the ecology and biodiversity aspects are covered under the outline conditions, so they're all being considered separately at the moment. So if anything is out of date, we will request up-to-date versions.
Councillor Mitchell.
Just a policy point. When this application last came to us, it was with an officer's recommendation to accept. The members turned that down and wrote us, gave a rationale for why they believed it couldn't be supported. It then went to appeal, and the appeal was upheld. And what I'm not concerned about is just a piece of information. So what does at the appeal stage, once the consent is given, what consent had been given? Does it revert to the officer's report when he was recommending? So therefore, we're dealing with all the points that have previously been worked on, or has the inspector set up a different rationale, so we're working on a different template than we were previously?
The inspector allowed the appeal with a different set of conditions than were recommended by officers when it was first presented to committee, and has control of the Section 106 obligations as well, although those haven't changed, particularly from the officer recommendation. So the outline consent was granted by the inspector at appeal.
So are there any major differences that you could highlight for us as committee members between that first one that we turned down and the new one that we're dealing with?
No, it's essentially for the same proposal, a proposal of up to 93 dwellings within the same parameters that members considered originally in committee.
And secondly, could I thank the officer for her comments aside the public comments, because I think that's helpful to us as members to actually see they have been addressed and are cross-referenced in the text. But some of them haven't been cross-referenced, and I know some have come up this evening, and you mentioned there, so I won't go over those again. But there was one particular one about the Devon Bank, and I just wonder if you could talk through us on that one. And I'm somewhat concerned, particularly of other things, on the amount of information we're getting from highways, because as members, when we did a site visit, highways, access, etc., were major issues for us in our determination at that time. And I'm just wondering if you've got any more detailed information on highways as to why they perceive there's no issues there.
So the Devon Bank, there's a note towards the end of the report. The Section 106 attached to the outline consent requires a contribution of something like £15,000 to be paid to the council. The council will then create the Devon Bank itself. So that would be, the developer wouldn't be doing that themselves. In terms of highways, the impact was assessed at the outline stage. So they look at the impact of 93 dwellings on the wider road network, and they look at the highway safety issues, and that's why you've got those quite detailed access plans that were approved at that stage.
Sorry, Councillor Ketch.
I wasn't privy to the wasn't around a few years ago when this was initially put through. There's just a sort of a query about the topography of the land sort of drops off as you come to the existing, I think it's Pinbrook and the sort of south-east corner. Is the expectation, because we talked that some of the important element of this is the profiling of the buildings and how they're laid out. You've obviously got that agreed in the outline permission. But is it the expectation that some of that land in the sort of southeast corner will need to be built up to sort of support the I think it's buildings 90 to 92 to sort of to support the way they're on an element that drops away? And if that's the case, would that, if that's not the case, then fine. But if that's the case, would that then sort of start impinging on the 12-metre outline planning issue? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, those height limits are from the existing ground level. So they wouldn't be increasing the ground level and then going up 12 metres or whatever. It's from the existing ground level. So at the outline consent, there were landscape value impact assessments, and a lot of thought went into the consideration of the impact on the wider landscape at that stage, and that's why you have those limits set out there. So the current scheme is within the parameters that were set out to protect the landscape setting.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just wondered if there was any more information about the separate planning application on the drainage details, because the note on that paper said it understood that it should be resolved prior to planning. You've explained why it hasn't been. But is there any update on that? Is it likely to be resolved, or do you simply not know at the moment?
Well, Devon County were requesting soakaway test results to basically demonstrate that the attenuation basin method was required, and they've received those, and they've said that the soakaway results show that it doesn't really soak away, and therefore the presumption is then that the attenuation will be required. But the officer is on leave till tomorrow, and no one else had time to look at it. So our understanding is that it should all be fine, but we just need to wait for them to remove their holding objection.
Anybody else wish to ask a question relating to the presentation? Councillor Getchin.
Is that working now?
It is now.
Yeah, okay. The current site, the residents that have access to the New Valley Park across the existing fields, though I don't think they're necessarily rights of way. With the way the layout is, obviously you've got the development sandwich lower down. Is there any thought to having rights of way behind, or is the expectation that what is there is lost, and therefore people use the public road? Does that make sense? So on site, there's the current place, the element that's being developed is got lots of public access, but I don't think it's formal rights of way. I think that's been stated. Is there any provision to sort of address that, or is it very much a case of what is there will be lost, and sort of the access to the New Valley Park is through the public roads? Does that make sense? Cleaner?
Yeah, so I think the general public outside of the new dwellings, they will be able to go through the new housing estate to access the New Valley Park. And there was a parameter plan called Movement and Access, I think, which had assessed all these routes, walking, cycle and vehicle routes. And the current scheme is in compliance with that approved plan. So like you said, there's no public right of way to use the 5 fields, but there will be through this application.
Yeah, just to confirm at the moment, the access to the site is informal. It could be closed off any time, but the outline permission included a legal agreement that would make the 3 adjoining fields publicly accessible in perpetuity. And obviously, when the highways are adopted as part of this scheme, the general public will have access through this site up into the New Valley Park.
Quick supplementary. You mentioned in perpetuity there, we sort of told that the S106 agreement, I think, slightly controversial. Oh, no, sorry, that's the wrong word entirely. Confidential. Even though, yeah, is that right? So the as we understand it, it's not clear that the New Valley Park will be in perpetuity a public asset or available to the public for access.
It will be publicly accessible in perpetuity. I think the question mark is who will manage it. So the option is there for it to be transferred to the council to manage it. But if the council doesn't take it on, then it would have to be managed by the development company in the same way that the public spaces on the built part of the site will be managed.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Just a question about the community orchard, really. What exactly will that consist of? Do we have any details, or is that going to be bottomed out later?
Yeah, the details are under consideration on the separate discharge of condition application.
I'm sorry, just to follow up if I may. Who will manage that community orchard? Will it be a management company that would be appointed to manage the whole site and therefore the community orchard as well?
So as with the Valley Park, the public open space is subject to the Section 106 agreement in terms of long-term management.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, now moving on to speakers. So we have a councillor who wishes to speak under Standing Order 44. It's Councillor Olcott.
Hi. There was a bit of a technical hiccup, so Dr. Baker, who would come to speak on behalf of the community, wasn't registered properly, so I'm going to read her speech at the end of mine, if that's okay. I've cleared that with the chair. Thank you, Chair. So, as many of you will no doubt be aware, this application has been and continues to be very controversial in the Beacon Heath area. During the outline application phase, it faced strong opposition by members of the community on the basis that as a hilltop greenfield site, it was unsustainable, inaccessible and a highly unsuitable location to be building new housing, and was the antithesis of the council's vision for brownfield first development. And when it came to committee, you all agreed with that view and it was unanimously refused. And a small group of community members, of which I was a part, then poured everything into defending the committee's decision during a 4-day public inquiry. It was a sad day for all of us when the planning inspector decided to uphold the appeal and grant outline permission. And I'm only saying all of this now because I know that many in the community are still upset and angered by that decision, and I want to acknowledge that tonight. However, we are where we are, and what's done is done. And now it's about looking forwards and ensuring that the housing that is built on those fields is the absolute best design and quality that it can be, and that negative impacts on the local area and neighbouring residents are mitigated to the fullest extent possible. And I'm very grateful to our planning officers who have been working very hard to make sure that this is the case. And it is clear that there have been substantial improvements made in the amended plans after having gone through the independent design review process, which is very reassuring. I have not heard directly of any specific concerns from residents regarding the design and layout of the build that I want to convey today, but I did want to use some of my time to just flag up some outstanding concerns from residents about the impact of the build and development, to which I hope members and officers might provide some further reassurance and also to discuss a couple of possible extra conditions. And I understand that many of these issues are being dealt with separately under the discharge of conditions applications, but I think we have residents watching tonight at home, and I want them to feel reassured that these issues are at least, being thoughtfully considered and scrutinised as part of this process. So firstly, just on safety, a key concern that our Rule 6 party highlighted during the appeal was the impact of creating the road through the community green at the top of Juniper Close, which is currently a very tranquil and safe green on which children play unaccompanied. And it's crucial that we make every effort to ensure they can continue to do so during the construction of the site and when the development is in place. So, as has been mentioned, we secured a £15,000 S106 contribution to build the Devon Bank on either side of that new road, to create a sound buffer between the road and the green. And I can see from the report that this money is due to be given to the council prior to commencement of the development. It is our view, if at all possible, that it is really important that this bank is put in place and established before any traffic can use this new access road. And I would ask if members could consider the feasibility of adding this as a condition to section 7, to highways construction road parking conditions, to set out that no traffic can use that road until the Devon Bank is in place. It's also really important for us that there is a mechanism through which the local community can help shape the design of that bank, and we've already started liaising with relevant officers over that, and will continue over the coming months. I'm really also reassured to hear that planning officers share our view that construction traffic should pass entirely through the Celia Crescent access point, and that they will be consulting with the Highways Authority to make sure that that is the case. Secondly, we've touched on flooding, and I appreciate that that's not, the scope of this discussion tonight. But again, for the sake of the public feeling reassured, I wanted to just draw the committee's attention to the fact that we already have serious excessive runoff water in the Beacon Heath area. Many houses directly below the development site have been using sandbags outside their doors to stop water coming through. The Beacon Centre, which is a community centre at the bottom of the hill, was very badly flooded in September. They had water actually coming out through the drains, so strong that it's actually pushing drain covers off. So we need to make sure that those flood defences are not only fit for purpose now, but also future-proofed and ready to accommodate increasing rainfall as climate change continues to grow. We have raised this as councillors with Matt Diamond, and did receive some real reassurance that actually the flood defences will not only mitigate the risk of this development, but actually improve existing flooding issues in the area. And I think they would just be very helpful that the public sort of could hear for that reassurance that we heard, whether tonight or through another means, but that we really scrutinise those, I know there's that outstanding objection that's hopefully going to be removed, but it's really important that we get that right. We can see in Pinhoe already the increase in flooding of the local area as those hills have been built on. So we don't want to make the same mistakes here. Thirdly, just on the Valley Park, again, I know that this isn't up for discussion tonight, but for us, it's one of the silver linings of a development that, you know, caused a lot of upset in the community, but I think we all agree that having that formalised and have that public access formalised is a real benefit for the community. We have already started having those discussions internally about what management of that land might look like going forward. We are concerned that if it is managed by the development management company, that it might lose some of its wild sort of open countryside characteristics. We are really keen to explore that Devon Wildlife Trust take on stewardship of that land and integrate it formally into a Valley Park, and integrate it into the surrounding Valley Park so it feels part of the network of green space and not just an amenity for the development itself. And to that end, we're really keen to explore whether there are different ways of accessing that Valley Park that don't require walking all the way through the houses. But that's not a discussion for tonight, but I just wanted to, for whoever's listening, know that we are on the case and we are having those conversations. The other thing I wanted to put out there was that I think the current conditions say that the public can have access to that Valley Park once 50% of the homes of the site are occupied, and we would be really keen to explore the feasibility of allowing access on some level, even if it's continued informal access to those fields prior to that, because as has been mentioned, the community have enjoyed walking on that land for generations, albeit informally. And it would be a really good faith, sort of act of good faith in re-establishing those good relationships with the community. If that could be explored, the developers could consider that, we would be grateful. One final comment I just wanted to draw attention to, and maybe there's an easy answer to this, but I have received some concerns that on that plan, those two roads in the bottom field that are leading to those houses sort of on the right-hand side, that they look as if they could be then used to be extended into the field to the east at some point in the future, which is currently privately owned, and it's highly sensitive. It's marked as highly sensitive in the under the new local plan evidence base. I just wondered if there was any reassurance that officers could provide at this stage, or if there's anything we could do within the plan to make it really clear that those roads will end where they currently end and couldn't be used to extend further northeast in the future. That's all I think I have to say. I do have Dr. Baker's speech to read out as well. I don't know if I will pause here and for any questions or discussion, or if I carry on.
I suggest that you continue, please, but obviously you won't be answering questions on Dr. Baker's comments. There there'll be questions relating to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for allowing this. Okay, this is Dr. Baker. Over the past 4 years, there has been significant effort to prevent development of this site and to set conditions to ensure its impact is minimised. Mr. Diamond and the Planning Department have worked tirelessly in the early years to minimise the area of the build and to negotiate for the new Valley Park. 465 members of the public objected to the development, and our councillor Naima Alcott provided eloquent reasoning for the development to be rejected by the Planning Committee. In response to the planning appeal, the community raised over £5,000 to support Rule 6 party involvement, and local citizens took over 20 days of annual leave and hundreds of hours of pro bono work to fight the development in a 4-day inquiry. Nobody wanted this valued part of the Northern Hills to be developed, but despite the best efforts of the community and those in this room, the whims of Whitehall and randomly assigned housing targets have got the better of us, and those in offices elsewhere in this country have decided the fate of this much-loved green hillside. This is, however, not the time to stop our fight. We still have the power to ensure that this development is the best it can be and has the least negative impact on the local community. The majority of concerns raised by the community are not directly relevant to this full planning application, but are more concerned with the details of the discharge conditions for which there has been no public consultation. We would like to see minuted assurance from the planning department that the flood mitigation put in place will be sufficient to reduce the impacts of this development and will decrease flood risk in the area, and that we will not end up as the subject of a future ITV drama. We fought for the condition to develop a Devon bank to protect Spruce Close from the access road and would like to be involved in the design and timing of its construction. We would like further consultation to discuss whether it is advantageous to route a bus through this estate and whether yellow lines on Pinwood Meadow Drive are advantageous or detrimental. We would like a say in the management of the Valley Park and to discuss in detail how biodiversity net gain will be achieved. We would like to negotiate access to the Valley Park before and during the construction phase. We wish to work collaboratively with Edenstone and the council to ensure that we can find a silver lining in this dark cloud that has blighted our community.
Thank you. I'm now inviting members of the committee to put questions to Councillor Alcock. Please, these questions should be about her presentation. Councillor Ketch.
You mentioned access to the Valley Park, and as I read it, when you talked about it, you're referring to the existing access that's sort of informal. And I wondered if you had any suggestion of what you felt, how that access could be implemented, perhaps as a condition, so that perhaps then we can later vote on that.
So my understanding from having talked to the developers about this at the inquiry is that there are, legitimate safety concerns about the public accessing those fields during construction, and that is something we would need to pay close attention to. There are existing, if you look at an aerial map, there's myriad sort of old paths that link the fields up. I don't think it need be that complicated. There would need to be thoughts given to safety. As I said, I understood that was the primary reason why they would be reticent to do that before the homes were occupied.
Thank you all, and thank you, Councillor. As has been mentioned, unfortunately, due to procedural missteps, Dr. Baker was not able to make her speech in opposition to this, but we do have a speaker in favour, a supporter, and also my notes.
Sorry.
Yes, I understand, but it was his surname. Mr. Tribal, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, remind you, Mr. Trumbull, you have 3 minutes, of course.
Yeah.
And thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for your time this evening to speak in support. My name is Dan Trundle and I work for Black Box Planning, who are the agents for this application. The proposal before you represents a high quality scheme from an independent regional house builder with a proven track record of delivery across the southwest. Edenstone have a well-reputed product, and this will be their second Devon scheme, but first in Exeter. As you have heard from the comprehensive officer reports and presentation, this is a site which was granted outline consent in 2022 for Edenstone's involvement. The outline consent established the principle and gave detailed approval for the 2 accesses into the site. The application before you is for a reserved matters approval of the detailed design and the other technical matters which are subject to other conditions application. The deadlines before you are the result of a considered and constructive pre-application inquiry with planning, design and ecology officers, which involved the proposal being assessed by an independent design review panel. The scheme accords with all of the approved parameter plans, Section 106 agreements from the Outline Commission, including delivery of the new Valley Park for the city on land which is currently private, providing approximately 9 hectares of green space for future residents in the existing community. The scheme itself will be a well-landscaped scheme with significant street tree planting and also delivering 2 new play areas in an orchard area. In terms of biodiversity net gain, the scheme will deliver a very significant 75% increase in habitats and 150% increase in hedgerows, far above the recently mandated 10% requirement for new applications. The dwellings themselves will be high specification, including improved building fabric, air source heat pumps with no connection to the gas grid, smart meters,
electric vehicle charging points, battery storage, and full fibre-ready broadband. Most importantly of all, the scheme delivers much-needed family housing, including a policy-compliant level 32 affordable homes. The affordable housing mix accords with locally assessed need. 23 will be available for social rent, with 9 available for shared ownership across a mix of 1 to 4 bedroom homes. Furthermore, the scheme is not currently included in the Council's 5-year housing land supply forecast, so by permitting this, it would have the added benefit of being added to that supply and improving the current position of the Council. I trust the members can conclude that this application represents high quality design, is universally compliant with the outline, planning permission and obligations, and that you can endorse the recommendation of your officers to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I now invite members to put questions to you based on your comments. So please stay put. Yeah, Councillor Mitchell.
So just follow up on the social and affordable housing element.
Mr. Trump, can you just
follow up on the social and affordable housing element? Can you assure us that this covers a range of plots on the site and they're not all blocked in one particular place, that they're scattered amongst the number there, because often developers will sometimes try to allocate them in a less suitable place, shall we say, than others in regard to that one. Thank you for that. Could I follow up on a point Councillor Alcock raised about access to the Valley Park? And she assured us, I'm not sure, she said one of the conditions that might be in the SMRC is that access will be available after 50% occupation. Could I ask why it's 50% occupation and not 50% construction? Because surely after you've constructed the 50%, you'd be doing normal work there, and possibly in that access, so would that not speed things up so access came earlier for members of the public?
So just on the affordable housing, I mean, all of the, in terms of the detailed location of each of those, that's obviously set out in the application. We had to have a bit of discussion with the affordable housing officer and the design officers about the clustering of that, and that was improved during the course of the application. So there was no more than 9 in any one location, and they are spread in the north and the south of the site. In terms of the new Valley Park, obviously touched on the fact that it is private land currently, so there's, legally speaking, I guess there's no rights of access being lost as a result of this application. I see this as purely benefiting access in kind of legal terms. Obviously, in terms of the kind of timing of that, and Councillor Alcott was right, and the previous developers who brought forward the outline application mentioning that obviously that there are health and safety concerns about management of access to that during the build, because I would suspect that it would be built from a sort of south to north direction. So in terms of actually accessing that part of the site in the north, then that would probably come towards the end. But obviously the developer even so will have to comply with the terms of Section 106 in terms of details to be submitted, both in terms of the design of that space, but also the management as well. So that's obviously set out in various triggers in that agreement. But I would suspect that the 50% trigger, there's a degree of science behind it in terms of when that part of the site may be built and access might be managed.
So just to clarify then, in regard to it, will there be a period of time, or can you give us an idea of a period of time when in fact there won't be public access to these new Valley Parks because of construction taking place?
I mean, not speaking on behalf of the developer, obviously I'm speaking on behalf of the developer, but I would suspect that access will have to be removed during the construction purely for health and safety reasons. I suspect that'll be the case. I can't see that there'd be a situation where you could encourage both kind of public access and a construction site in the same location. I think that'd be unwise.
But you can't indicate the length of time that might impact the community.
I suspect that something like this, I mean, probably talking, I mean, it's really difficult to say, to be honest, but I think obviously, I think as long as there are kind of the developer kind of continues to engage the community and officers, throughout the construction period, and obviously that's the other factor in this that officers mentioned, is that there's a requirement for a construction management plan to be submitted prior to commencement. So obviously in terms of access to the site and length of the build, those details will be set out in that process.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions, please? Dan? No, in that case, thank you very much indeed for your time. And I wish to move us into our debate and invite our members to contribute to the debate on this matter. Councillor Vizza.
Somebody has to start, so I will volunteer. I think worth saying firstly, although I wasn't on the committee at the time, I think the refusal previously was the right decision. So it is a pity that we are where we are, but we are where we are. But I do commend and applaud the work of the residents of the area and of Councillor Alcock, who has demonstrated an absolutely brilliant role as a councillor, local councillor, really representing people's views through the Rule 6. Very intense, I know. So I do congratulate everybody involved on that for all of their efforts. I think the one thing I would like to reflect on, and maybe we can get some advice on this, is the suggestion from Councillor Alcock of an additional condition on the traffic and the Devon Bank, not allowing traffic before the Devon Bank is created. I take advice on that. I appreciate we're in the debate stage rather than that, but that is a new thing that's come forward from what we've heard. So I think it is the least we can do, given what the residents have had to deal with here and all the efforts they put in, that we could consider that as an additional condition. So I'll take advice on that if I may, but there are no grounds to refuse the application that's in front of us. That's pretty clear, despite what the history is. So I'm obviously happy to approve it, but I would like some discussion of that condition that's been proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ketchin.
Just a quick one. Access for construction is through Celia Avenue, is that right? So surely it's not mutually exclusive that the Devon Bank can be built and ASAP, or there's no conflict of interest with the construction crews because they're accessing a different road.
Thank you, Councillor. Just take a brief pause whilst I have a conflict. Thank you. Thank you. So my advice is that if we do propose to put that additional clause in, that will give the officers an opportunity to indicate to you what can and can't go in and how that could be addressed. And therefore, having heard those responses from the officers, you can perhaps come to an agreement as to whether you will or will not propose that. So that is our way forward. If Councillor Ketchin.
We're at the point that can make a proposal. Are we going to do the chat first with everyone?
I'll give direct.
I think, as was suggested, I think by Councillor Vizza, take some advice. If you're minded as a committee to propose that amendment, we'd like to give you a chance to give you some advice first. And I think I'll sort of bring Simon and Matt in for that, just in terms of that condition.
Are we offering that advice now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So in that case, I will ask to the officers and ask specifically for advice on these matters.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think the Ward Councillor has asked if a condition can be added requiring the implementation of the Devon Hedge Bank prior to the access being used by traffic. So The first thing to point out is that when you add any condition, it needs to comply with legal tests, including as necessary to planning and is reasonable. Those are the key ones to consider here. The area indicated for the Devon Hedge Bank, which was included in the Section 106 agreement, is actually outside the red line. So it's on council-owned land, it's not within the red line of this application. And for dealing with the reserve matters application, we can add further conditions, but only as long as they relate to the reserve matters. We can't add any other conditions that would normally have been added to the planning permission aspect, which was when it was dealt with at outline stage. So we don't consider that it would comply with the tests to add such a condition here, primarily for that reason, because it doesn't relate to the reserve matters being considered this evening. At the same time, it was a matter that was considered by the inspector for the appeal, and obviously the inspector had the choice of adding a condition then and decided not to do so. The thing to remember here is that through the appeal, the local community has negotiated this sum of money to be given to the council in order to provide a boundary treatment of some sort. Obviously, we're talking about it in the context of providing a Devon Hedge Bank, which would be the obvious thing to do. That will be paid to the council prior to commencement of development, and it's entirely within our control as to what nature that boundary treatment is and when it's delivered. So on that basis as well, we think it would be unreasonable, not comply with the legal tests to add the condition that's being requested.
Thank you very much. So, ask first of all, ask Councillor Ketch, is that satisfied?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
So I think my conclusion from that is that it falls to us as councillors to discuss the matter rather than us as planning committee members. Yes. Right. We're back again into debate, please. Can I ask if anybody wishes to contribute to the debate on the planning application? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Just echo comments by Councillor Bizarre that I do think it's a shame we're at this point. But we are, as you said, where we are, and I don't think there are any conditions to refuse. But that said, I would like to get some advice from officers about the points raised by Councillor Alcock around the measures being put in place to deal with runoff and drainage. Thank you.
Are you ready to take that?
Yes, that's me, Chair. So I think Councillor Walcott was referring to some reassurance that we as officers gave to the ward councillors at a meeting recently regarding drainage. I think all we can say is that we know that the land isn't draining particularly well at the moment because of the nature of the soil and because it's sloping, so it is sloping down and affecting existing properties, which is something we were aware of when the application was considered at outline stage. As with any development proposal, flooding and drainage are key aspects. There was a condition added as part of the appeal decision to require details of the drainage to be provided, and that's being dealt with by a separate discharge condition application. As is normal for these situations, developers need to predict the level of rainfall into the future and take into account issues of climate change and so on. So it's quite a high bar that the developers have to work to in terms of predicting the amount of rainfall that they'll need to take into account. So the developers have provided a drainage strategy, which includes a mixture of natural attenuation and basically mechanical attenuation, which will ensure that the water runoff will be no greater than the greenfield runoff rate. So the end situation will be an improvement. But it is the lead local flood authority, which is Devon County Council, that employ drainage engineers who are assessing this aspect of the proposals, and clearly they're very technical. So we as planning officers can't give you precise details, but rest assured it's a matter that has been dealt with properly, and should result in an improvement to local residents.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Referring to section 13 on the S106 agreement, it said this was undertaken in the outline stage. So how is that impacted by the appeal? What is the status of the S106? Because normally with these documents we get a list with the S1 appeal, so much going here, so much going here, whatever. And it seems with this application at this stage, we do seem to have a lot of loose ends that still need to be determined. And I'm just wondering whether we as a committee, at what stages we as a committee will find out these are resolved and will they be reported to it, be it highways, be it the flooding issues, and the issue we've talked about on the Valley Park, etc. They don't form part of the they're part of the agreements to be reached with the developer. Will those then be reported back to this committee, or are we just leaving it effectively to the officers to resolve these missing elements?
I'm going to ask if you can give a response to that, but I do want to remind committee members that we're in debate stage, and Alan shouldn't simply be firing questions and then expecting off-the-cuff answers. Okay,
I think the really straightforward answer is that section 6 is completed, it's signed, and that goes with the planning permission. So what you're considering tonight is discharge of a condition effect, which is the reserved matters. So there is no further 106 agreement to report on. It's been signed.
Thank you, Director. Does anybody else wish to contribute to the debate, please? In that case, if there are no further contributions, then I would like to move the motion. The motion is that we accept the officer's recommendation and grant, subject to the many conditions that are attached, including the amended condition 7. Do I have a second, please? Councillor Asher. I'm going to ask those in favour, please, of accepting the recommendation. Thank you. Those against, please. And abstentions, please. One abstention. Thank you very much. And as was that vote, that motion is passed. Item number 6 on our agenda is a list of decisions made and withdrawn applications. You received this pack with your minutes, and I ask, does anybody have any questions relating to the decisions made and withdrawn applications?
I just wanted to make the comment that there's an awful lot of decisions there that have been determined. So I just want to thank my team for that. That's quite an unusual number in a reporting period. Obviously, there's been a lot of work from there to acknowledge and the work of the teams in determining that number of applications.
Thank you. I second that very much so. We now have the appeals reports. This is item number 7. You have again received those appeals. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I see Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I note that we've got the appeal decision on the former police station site, which was dated the 2nd of February. So I'm highly grateful that this has come before us. But also on the 2nd of February, there was a Court of Justice decision regarding the council. So I'm just asking, connected, when will we get a report on this? Because I think there are matters that the committee of some format need to be discussed, because I'm particularly concerned about the role of the Devon County Council.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll have asked the director to make a comment about that, but I'd like that at the end. Please, thank you. Looking at the appeals report in front of us and the matters that are already circulated, does anybody have any comments, questions? No, in that case, thank you. So a couple of comments. You've got in, and there you've got comments on the issue. There you go. Hand over to the director.
I'll make a couple of comments. There are two very significant appeal decisions. So the first one is the Herefordshire Road application. And I think just pulling out from what is a very detailed report, obviously it was a very lengthy public inquiry. The sort of resulting comment really from the inspector, which ultimately led to the appeal being dismissed, was the fact that it was a design issue. So there were many issues that were looked at. There was the issue about scale and massing of the proposed buildings being out of keeping with the character and appearance of the surrounding area, which ultimately was the determining factor, according to the inspector. The other thing to note from that decision is that again, this is the sort of timing issue really, but the tilted balance was not engaged at that appeal because the 5-year rule was changed to the 4-year in effect. However, the inspector did give significant weight to the need for housing provision. So there's no doubt in my mind that there will be another scheme on this site. Eventually, there needs to be development of this site. It's a brownfield site, which is an eyesore at the moment. So we would expect to receive further information, further detail, ultimately a new application on that site. My officers are ready and waiting to engage the landowner, the developer, if they're still interested in further discussions. I think also, because it was such a wide-ranging and significant appeal decision, there's an opportunity there for some learning. So I think we're going to work with the team here and sort of bring that scheme back as a learning opportunity, really, to sort of go through what some of the issues were, how the inspector considered them, how they differed from the appellant. All of that stuff I think is a really good learning option. And not to propose a new scheme, but it'll be like a case review, and we'll do that informally with you guys in the future. So that's something else. There was the other appeal that I think is significant. Relates to Pendragon Road, which is also in the papers. So that appeal decision again looked at, I guess, the issues of character and appearance, and was kind of that was the major sort of, again, the major determining factor for that site. The appeal was so the planning committee refused planning permission, but the appeal was this time upheld. So the reverse really of Evertree Road. And really just sort of highlighting again really that it's a difficult issue. Character, design, appearance is something that is often contended. So again, going back to what I said earlier, I think some further opportunities there to understand that decision, do some further work with you in terms of that, and unpicking that would be useful. But we'll look at that. I'm really keen that we take any opportunity really to sort of learn from decisions, use what information we can, and bring that back. So we'll be doing that as well. The other thing to point out there, again, it's an odd timing issue, but on that appeal, the 5-year land supply was engaged, and it's just a point about timing. It's something that's constantly under review, whether that's government policy or it's just a case of what our 5-year or 4-year land supply is at the time. It's important to recognise it's at the point of the decision that it's engaged or not engaged. So it is one of those oddities of planning, really. So in one appeal it wasn't engaged, on another it was. So just to say, so we already wanted to make a statement about St. Bridget's Nursery. So this is the High Court decision that was handed down, and which Councillor Mitchell referred to. So you members will be aware, I'm sure, about the High Court decision. And it's a judgment against this committee's decision to grant planning permission for that scheme. So the officers have considered that judgment to quash the decision very carefully. And I can report that the officers are putting in place steps now to consider that matter afresh, and the application will be brought back to be redetermined by this committee in due course. Happy to take any questions about that.
Judicial review is about process and not following the process as far as the law was concerned with the others on planning distinct issues. And it's about the process that concerns me. It particularly concerns me that a lot of the issues revolved around highway issues with both Devon County, and I'm working with Devon County, and Devon County chose not to partake in this exercise, not submitting evidence, not submitting documents, etc. It says in paragraph 49, unfortunately, Devon County Council decided not to participate in these proceedings, and therefore the court has no explanation for its undisputed failure to consider the availability of highway access and the loss of immunity, etc., which was the core issue that we were concerned about as members. And it does concern me that we, as council taxpayers in Exeter, have to pick up the bill for this particular exercise, when in fact a lot of the liability, in my view, lies with Devon County Council. So can we be ensured that any costs here will be shared with the county and not only be felt by us in Exeter for their negligence and their inability to turn up and represent their arguments?
So I can't comment on the role of Devon County Council. All I can confirm is that there was a cost determination. So Exeter City Council has had to pay a certain proportion. The majority of the costs actually were with the developer, not the city council, but we were an interested party and had to pick up some of that cost, and that's part of the judgment that you've seen coming down.
Okay, Councillor Mizon, yes. So you take questions.
Not actually a question, but I just going back to the Heaventree Road, I just thought worth putting on public record what I said privately to officers, which is to thank particularly Chris Cummings, the planning officer who led that, but also Matt Diamond and Simon and the barrister who represented the case. I think the judgment does vindicate the decision of this committee, which I was on the other side of it at that point. Speaking against, but it's also useful and probably worth it. I absolutely welcome the director's suggestions of learning from both that and Pendragon. I think that's a very good idea. It also, I note, not only was it scale and massive, but I think it's useful to note the inspector's call that is not a city centre gateway site as such. It's not a city centre site, which is interesting, because that was a lot of the debate around that as to whether that was really a gateway site or a city centre site, and I think it does suggest that it isn't, although it is obviously borderline. So yeah, very interesting case, and I just wanted to put on my record, particularly my personal thanks from the community.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ketchin.
Well, I feel I've not said very much. Give me a second. The theme that's come out of the Pendragon, a couple of these things, is engagement with Devon County Council, and I think I've seen that the planning team are co-opting a Devon County Council officer into the team, and there's going to be a tight, closer relationship. If I've got that wrong, I'm sorry to hear that, but I've seen in a previous development, Westex, I think it was, where there's a huge development, and having spoken to the county council, engaged with that site, Devon County Council didn't really come to the party with that. I just sort of want to ask or emphasise that with these schemes, we make, it's, the onus on us is to get these great schemes delivered, less so Devon County Council. So the sort of some of the learning I would hope could be emphasised on making sure Devon County Council come to the party and fully engaged with us, whether it's in the Transport Working Group or Joint Transport Working Group or similar.
Just a generic comment, not about any particular application, but we do have support from Devon County Council, and they do look at all certainly all major planning applications, and they do provide us with expert commentary and advice quite often. They're here at committee to answer questions as well. That we're always looking at how we can improve and get more information and work with Devon County, but we do always get support and advice, and there is a dedicated officer who deals with that, who you've met on many occasions. He's not here tonight, but he often is. So I feel as though we do work really well with Devon County Council. So, if there's areas that we want to look at retrospectively and say we could have worked better, we'll always look at that as well. But as I say, just a generic point really, that we are the highway authority, and they do work with us on planning applications.
I would just like to say that we are in a public and recorded meeting, and I think that perhaps some of these conversations we need to be having perhaps as a committee, either in a members working group or at a meeting that we can convene between us, and we can raise these topics and perhaps talk a little more about them. So I'd like to draw that discussion to a close, please. Thank you. Right, okay, we have considered item 7, which is the appeals report. Our next item is the date of the next meeting. I've got Monday the 25th of March as that meeting date. Put that in your diaries, thank you. Thank you all very much indeed for your attendance this evening. Thank you for your concentration on the matters at hand, and I hope to see you all at the next meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.